Nintendo have had their fair share of strange or downright awful products in the past, but often they're left to either disappear to time or weren't too prominent in the mainstream to begin with. The Nintendo Power Glove, however, is a bit of an exception to this rule. While it doesn't hold the same legacy as the NES itself or the Game Boy, the Power Glove is still pretty iconic, even if it kinda sucked. The Power Glove was a very early attempt at virtual reality. It was a wearable controller that was supposed to let you control games using motion. A sort of motion control, if you will. And we all know how much people love motion controls. Albeit a much more primitive device that was nowhere near as good at detecting your motions, this was still pretty damn cool for 1989. There were a couple of games that were designed specifically with the Power Glove in mind, and more that did get announced but never saw the light of day. And there were even more gloves that were planned in the future, like the Turbo Glove, which was meant to be this lightweight version. So it was pretty clear that Nintendo had a lot of faith in the controller initially. The glove was designed by Samuel Cooper Davis, however, this wasn't actually the first ever creation of a virtual reality glove. The Data Glove actually came before it, developed by these guys, which proved helpful for the development of the Power Glove. Overall, it took 8 weeks to develop the final product. The design of the glove admittedly looks pretty cool in my opinion. The NES colours mixed with this neon blue writing and the controller panel on the forearm look like something out of Tron. The real kicker though is of course the motion controls. Wiggle your fingers around to perform different actions in your game. Pretty cool, right? Kind of, but also, no, not really. The Power Glove was really fiddly. You'd have to calibrate it initially, which was a fairly delicate process because if you did any of the movements wrong, your glove wouldn't work properly. Now to add on to that, all of this time is being spent with your arm outstretched towards the sensor. And one thing that Nintendo didn't think about was that all of these kids trying to play with their new toy on Christmas aren't going to be stamina athletes. So people would get tired, which can easily lead to calibration issues and, well, you can see how this just goes in circles. This was actually one of the biggest issues in general with the Power Glove. Naturally, your arm would get tired after a little while of playing, which ironically makes it less immersive than non-virtual reality devices, and takes away half of the fun. The glove had some pretty good marketing behind it. Featuring in the Nintendo film, The Wizard, really helped because it was only shortly after the Power Glove was first released, and a couple of weeks before Christmas. If you saw the film, you knew exactly what you wanted Santa to bring you that year. However, the glove was actually discontinued only a year later. Part of this was of course the fact that it was hard to use and annoying to calibrate, which sucked the fun out of everything, but arguably the bigger culprit were its games. 2 games released with the Power Glove specifically in mind. Super Glove Ball, which was a game where you'd use your real life glove to control a virtual glove on screen. You had to destroy the tiles around the room while keeping the ball in play. Sometimes when you broke a tile, there would be a red arrow that indicated that you could go into the next room. Basically, it was a weird virtual reality Pong with a maze that you had to traverse. The other game was a beat 'em up called Bad Street Brawler, where you controlled local bad boy Duke Davis, who is also apparently called Duke Donegan on the back of the box, who has to beat up gangsters and is known as the world's coolest martial artist punk rocker. Somebody definitely smoked something before creating this character. Duke definitely had a lot more character than the protagonist of Super Glove Ball, due to the fact that he wasn't a flying glove. However, made his mark in history by being in one of the worst games of all time according to Electronic Gaming Monthly. With these 2 games being all you had to play with the Power Glove in mind, and neither being particularly great to play due to the weird controls, there was very little reason for people to want to use the Power Glove over using a normal controller instead. Half the time was spent calibrating it, the other half was controlling the fluorescent yellow Duke friggin' Davis, while your arm went numb. On top of this, they needed to keep the glove affordable, which was what led to cost cutting and less impressive hardware than the Data Glove had. So overall, you had a device that was hard to set up, hard to use, had only a couple of games that were designed with the glove in mind, and generally was way too ahead of its time. The Wii achieved everything that the Power Glove could only dream of doing in a single game, because technology had progressed enough for it to be possible. But I really don't want to shit on it too much because, well, I really like it. It's just so cool. Even if it doesn't work great and hasn't got too many games to play, it looks pretty fantastic in my eyes and has such a cool legacy because of this. It's seen in so many different pieces of media and is pretty iconic to the late 80s. Needless to say, I want one just to say that I have a Nintendo Power Glove. This does actually raise a question from me though. When are we going to see the next Nintendo virtual reality attempt? We've seen the Virtual Boy and the Power Glove, which were honestly not big successes, but since then, Nintendo have come so far in things like motion controls and what their tech can do. I know that there probably won't be a big VR push from the company, but it would be pretty amazing to see what they could come up with. Just imagine a VR Pokémon or Zelda game, for example. I honestly think mixing it with the current trend of open world games would be pretty amazing. Until then though, we'll always have the Power Glove and the wondrous adventures of Duke Davis.